All right, so today we're diving into something pretty
All
fascinating.
right.
This 1847 book on New Brunswick.
Wow.
I know, right? Talk about a blast from the past. I mean,
Yeah. Before Canada?
exactly. It's wild to think this was written even before Canada as we know it existed.
Right.
It really gets you thinking, like, what did they even consider this place back then? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, what stories were they telling about how it all began?
Well, and that's what's so great about having a primary source like this.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us that window into how New Brunswick was seen way back then.
Yeah.
It's not just names and dates. It's like a whole snapshot of their world, even their biases.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of perspectives, this book wastes no time. It jumps right into, like, who discovered New Brunswick?
Oh.
And get this, they're saying John Cabot sailed through here even before Columbus made it to the Caribbean.
Wow.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think about whose stories end up being told right.
It's a perfect example of how history can be told from just one point of view.
Totally.
And in this case, the book presents Cabot's arrival as the discovery,
Right.
but it completely overlooks, like you said, the indigenous peoples who've been here for centuries.
Exactly. And it's something we're still grappling with today, right?
Right.
Recognizing those different perspectives.
Absolutely.
But then the book takes this even more interesting turn when it starts describing the native tribes that were here, the Micmac and Wolastoqiyik Milisate.
Okay.
And get this, it compares their customs to the ancient Israelites.
Really?
I know, I had to stop and reread that one.
Wow, that's fascinating though, isn't it?
It is. It's like, what?
It
Yeah.
really gives you a glimpse into the mindset back then.
Totally.
These 19th century Europeans trying to understand these completely different cultures through their own limited lens,
Right.
often by making connections to their own familiar narratives, like the Bible in this case.
It's like they were searching for some kind of reference point,
Yeah,
a way to make sense of something unfamiliar.
exactly. And it makes you wonder if those comparisons
Yeah,
really say more about the author than the actual cultures they're describing.
totally. It's like projecting your own worldview onto something new.
Yeah.
And speaking of cultural clashes, things get really interesting when the book delves into the struggle between the French and English
Oh, right.
for control over New Brunswick.
It was a pivotal time for
They
sure.
were a total tug of war.
It really shaped New Brunswick's identity.
Totally. And the book highlights these key figures like De Monts, Latour, and Charnisay all vying for power.
Oh, yeah, they were major players.
And then there's this incredible story about Lady Latour
Oh, yes.
defending her fort practically single-handedly against a siege.
What a story.
Right. Talk about courage in the face of chaos.
It really brings history to life, those stories of resilience.
Totally. It reminds you that these weren't just events in a book. Real people lived through this.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the human cost of those power struggles.
Exactly.
The book touches on the Acadian expulsion, a truly tragic event.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
Thousands of people displaced,
And their whole lives turned upside down.
forced to leave their homes, their communities.
A tragic reminder that history is more than just dates. It's people's lives.
Absolutely. And it created this void in a way. And the book points out
Yeah.
this paved the way for the arrival of the Loyalists fleeing the American Revolution.
Right, seeking refuge and a new start.
Exactly. And that term loyalist, it carries so much weight.
It does.
Imagine the turmoil, the conviction to choose allegiance to the crown over your own homeland.
It must have been an incredibly difficult decision to make.
Absolutely. One with lasting consequences for the future of New Brunswick.
You know what I found fascinating? It's how the book shifts gears a bit.
Oh, yeah.
It goes from these big historical players to like the everyday lives of people in New Brunswick.
Right.
Like I was really drawn in by those parts, you know?
Yeah.
The descriptions of the winters, like how harsh they were.
Yeah.
And then how quickly spring would come and everything coming back to life. And just the importance of agriculture and timber.
Yeah.
Like it really painted a picture of what life was like.
And it's interesting because you almost get this promotional tone
Tell me about it.
when they're describing all this.
It's like reading a travel brochure.
Right.
Come to New Brunswick, abundant harvests.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to entice people.
I guess attracting settlers was a big deal back then.
Oh, absolutely. A key part of building up the province.
Makes sense. But you know what else I found interesting?
What's that?
How the book talks about fishing disputes.
Oh,
It's like something you'd think is a modern problem.
you'd think so, wouldn't you?
But even back then, they were dealing with it. American fishing vessels encroaching on their waters.
It's fascinating how these things repeat through history.
It makes you wonder how much has really changed, right?
Well, and it's interesting because What they considered an encroachment back then
Yeah.
might have been different than how we see it now.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, think about it. It wasn't always about these clearly defined borders on a map.
Right, right.
It could have been more about exceeding informal agreements
Oh, interesting.
or going beyond traditional fishing grounds.
So more about respect and unwritten rule.
Exactly. But the book makes it clear these encroachments were a big deal,
Yeah.
seen as a threat to New Brunswick's economy.
Because fish was so important.
Exactly. A vital resource. Even led to diplomatic tensions.
Oh, wow. I bet.
It makes sense, though, right?
Totally.
Control over valuable resources like that,
Especially something as essential as fish.
it could easily become a point of conflict between nations. A recipe for disaster.
Right. And the book actually mentions this one incident
Oh, really?
with this particular fish.
What kind of fish are we talking about?
It wasn't so much the type of fish itself,
Okay.
but the location where they were catching them.
Oh, I see.
The Bay of Fundy.
Okay.
American fishermen going further into what New Brunswick considered their waters.
Oh, boy. Trouble in the water.
Big time. Outrage, accusations of unfair competition.
Sounds like it could escalate quick.
Oh, absolutely. From cod to chaos.
Exactly.
It just shows how these disagreements,
Especially when tied to livelihoods.
absolutely, can turn into major international incidents.
Wow. The Bay of Fundy, a potential powder keg.
Right. And the book uses this incident as a way to look at these larger geopolitical dynamics.
So this one little fish story.
Well, the location, at least,
Yeah.
it becomes this lens to view the whole balance of power.
Exactly.
Wow, that's wild.
It is.
It's amazing when you think about it how different we see New Brunswick now
Totally.
compared to how this book from 1847 portrays it.
It's like night and day in some ways.
Right. It's like looking through a time machine or something.
Exactly. Back then, it was all come to New Brunswick. Fertile land.
It's cool.
Endless resources.
Trying to entice people. Yeah. And now we see it with new eyes, right? The natural beauty, the mix of cultures.
Absolutely. It's got its own unique character for sure.
It really does. And thinking back to where we started, this whole deep dive.
Yeah, with this book, that questions the very idea of discovery.
Right. And we unpacked how they saw the indigenous peoples who were here long before.
The Europeans arrived,
Mhm.
then the struggles of those early settlers.
Even those fishing disputes that almost went global. What a journey.
It has been quite a journey through time.
And through it all, what I find really striking is how resilient New Brunswick has been.
Absolutely. It's gone through a
Yeah.
lot. Conflict, upheaval, change,
Yet it's come out of it all with this strong identity.
and a rich tapestry of cultures. You really see that shining through.
It makes you realize history isn't just something we read about.
It's alive.
It's the foundation of who we are today, right?
Yeah.
All those choices, those events, the challenges.
They've all shaped the New Brunswick we know.
Exactly. And that makes me think about our listeners.
What's their connection to this place?
Right after taking this deep dive with us, how'd they see New Brunswick differently now?
Has it shifted their perspective at all?
It makes you appreciate it in a whole new light, doesn't it? Knowing its past.
It does. All those complexities, the contradictions.
It just adds another layer to what it means to be connected to this place today.
Exactly. It's more than just a place on a map.
It's got this whole rich story behind it.
A story that continues to unfold.